Yeah, microphones are on. He's rallied the residents.
Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Monday, October 15th, 2018 to order. We have a full house this evening, and it's great to see so many residents here, so thank you very much for coming. I know that many of you are here to deal with the first, the presentations that we're having and the interim control bylaw, so we're going to be dealing with that first. We do start by singing the national anthem, and I would ask all who are able to rise and Councillor Papp to lead us in that anthem. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all our sons command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. First item of business is approval of the agenda. The motion has been made by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Accursi, that the agenda for the October 15th, 2018 regular meeting of council be adopted. And I believe Councillor Durley has an amendment to the order. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And recognizing the large group that's here and the being considerate to move 951 and 14.1 issues that are dealing with the cannabis issue up underneath the interim control bylaw regulations of presenters, just under 5.3, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor King. I'll call the question on that amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment carries. Thank you. I understand from the CAO that he has, there's some unfinished business that he'd like to talk about regarding the Public Works Department and the hiring of a director, and I would ask that perhaps we would have a motion to add that to unfinished business under 12. Moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Lane. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Are there any other changes to the agenda? There being none, I'm going to call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries as amended. Thank you. Now we move to disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest that any members of council may have. Do any members have any conflicts? Councillor Papp?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, under item 11.2, staff reports regarding the site plan control application for 1105 Baxter Lane and 769 Welland Road, and also the accompanying bylaw being bylaw under section 14, bylaw 4047, which would be the authorization to execute the site plan agreement. I will not be participating as my son is an employee of the proponents.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other conflicts of interest?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can that be so noted? Now we move to, we have some housekeeping from our last meeting, and that is regarding tax write-offs. It was advertised that there would be some tax write-offs under the Municipal Act, Section 357 and 358. So it has been moved by Councillor Accursi, seconded by Councillor Lane. Be it resolved that Council receives the tax write-off report from the Corporate Services Department and that Council approve the write-offs written off report in the amount of $4,795.07 as per the Municipal Act, Sections 357, 358. I'll turn to the treasurer first. There was some questions last meeting about the amounts. Have these been corrected?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. The numbers have been verified. The numbers were correct last time. And there was also a question raised by one of the councillors on the last one, why there was an addition and a subtraction. This is for 1 Highway 20 West, and the adjustment of the increase, decrease for this property as a result of removing the commercial occupied and residential assessment from the property and changing the class to a commercial vacant. So that's why you see the increase and decrease.
Okay, thank you. Now we actually open it up to the floor to see if there's any members of the public here that are affected by these tax write-offs that would like to present to council. We did have a person last meeting. I wonder if anyone's here this meeting? Going once, going twice? Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So is council prepared for me calling the question on the tax write-off report? I will do so. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Now to the presentations and the delegations. So under 531, we have representatives from Can Trust Incorporated. Sullivan Manny here. Mr. Richardson, thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Tom Richardson. I'm a senior member of the law firm of Sullivan Manny in St. Catharines. I've asked for an opportunity to speak to you this evening with respect to proposed bylaw 4046-2018, being an interim control bylaw regarding cannabis-related land uses. I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of Can Trust, Inc. With me this evening is Mr. Michael Ravensdale, a Senior Vice President of Quality and Production for Can Trust, and Mr. Michael Camplin, General Manager of the facility in Pelham. Both of them are available to answer any questions after my presentation. We'd also ask for an opportunity, should you have questions, to respond after the presentation to you by Mr. Ireland. If it raises other questions, both these gentlemen and myself would be happy to respond.
Okay,
Can Trust is a publicly traded corporation with its head office in Vaughan. It is a federally regulated, licensed producer of cannabis with over 40 years of experience in pharmaceuticals and health care. On October the 3rd, Can Trust announced that it was celebrating its reaching a milestone of 50,000 patients who utilize cannabis-related products produced by Can Trust. Can Trust currently owns the property at 1396 Balfour Street in Pelham. It acquired this property in 2017 to grow 100% pesticide-free standardized medical cannabis for patients in need. The site currently has 380,000 square feet of greenhouse and 100,000 square feet of header houses. The site is used strictly for the growing of cannabis in greenhouses. The processing of the medicinal cannabis is done at Can Trust Vaughan's location. The site at 1396 Balfour is licensed by Health Canada for the production of medical cannabis. The cannabis grown on this site is not a variety which produces a skunk smell. As you may be aware, persons are unable to purchase cannabis at this site. Any prescribed medicinal product must be authorized pursuant to the federal regulations and delivered by mail. Can Trust was welcomed into this community and has made a significant investment in Pelham. It has made a capital expenditure in the amount exceeding $50 million. It employs 270 people, which will increase tomorrow by a further 22 people for a total employment role of 292 people. Many of these employees are residents of the town of Pelham. Several of them have moved to the municipality for the employment. All of the employees receive much more than minimum wage, together with stock options. There is no offshore labor. Can Trust has an agreement of purchase and sale to acquire additional property located at 1350 Balfour Street. That transaction was to close on October the 10th. However, there have been some title issues which have delayed the closing. Can Trust proposes to expand its agricultural operations by an additional 700,000 square feet of greenhouse space. The existing and proposed greenhouse facilities are shown on the sketch, which was provided with our request for delegation, which I believe you have in front of you. CanTrust has just acquired building permits for a cogeneration plant on site to produce energy for its own purposes. Together with a building permit for locker room space, CanTrust has applied for or will apply for building permits for an additional 700,000 square feet of space to be built on the property at 1396 Balfour and the property to be acquired at 1350. As you might appreciate, CanTrust has made a substantial investment in this municipality, which has resulted in the employment opportunities for 292 people. The proposed expansion will lead to additional employment opportunities. The facilities are greenhouses, which are a recognized agricultural facility, which are permitted by your official plan and your zoning bylaw. The site meets all federal requirements with respect to the inhibition of odors. The site is well secured by smart fence, over 100 security cameras, and full-time security. The product is stored in a secure facility pending shipment to its processing facility in Vaughan. While our client understands that the town wishes to take a breath to consider the impacts of cannabis-related uses on the town, the proposed interim control bylaw will significantly impact our client's existing and planned proposed agricultural operation, not the least of which will be the prohibition against the expansion of 700,000 square feet. When our client was first invested in the town, the proposed scope of the agricultural operation had been planned and determined. Consequently, our request to you this evening is that council amend the proposed interim control bylaw by exempting the properties at 1396 Balfour and 1350 Balfour for the growing of cannabis, medicinal cannabis. Our client has no objection to the interim prohibition of processing and the sale of cannabis products. On behalf of CanTrust, then, I respectfully request that the council direct staff to provide an amendment to the proposed bylaw 4046/2018 to exempt its operation at the use at the property of 1396 and 1350 Balfour Street for the growing of medical cannabis, thereby allowing for the planned expansion of this operation, which has invested significantly in this community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Richardson, for your presentation on behalf of CanTrust. Do members of council have any questions for Mr. Richardson and/or representatives of CanTrust? Councilor Ribbiak, and then Councilor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, I think this is the first opportunity we as council have had to speak to the industry directly. I think before this, the industry has come into the town quite legitimately, but using greenhouses that were already in place, using zoning that was already in place, and so no application was ever brought here for us to consider. And that being the case, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I want to take the opportunity to just ask a few questions about some of the issues that have been raised by our residents that we've not had the opportunity to ask before. So
Okay,
with
thank
your
you.
indulgence, I'd like to do that.
Should I ask Mr. Camplin and Mr. Ravensdale to come up now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is that?
Might be prudent, yes, thanks. Okay, go ahead,
Thank you.
Councilor,
And
through me,
through-
please.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Mayor, good evening to all of you, and thanks for being here. There are considerable issues expressed to us within the community, and I'd like to just go over those with you. Some of those, Mr. Richardson, you've addressed, but others are not, and we may find ourselves repeating those as we go through this. The first set of questions I'd like to ask is with regard to smell and light. I know you've indicated that the skunk smell doesn't emanate from your facility, but residents in the area absolutely indicate that there are odors that come from your facility. I guess the question that I would have is what's being done about that, and then what would be different about the additional 700,000 square feet of greenhouse space that would be used for the same purpose? Can we start there, please?
Sure. What's that? Sure. Okay, so there are odor control systems in the greenhouse, and there's you will. I can't say that you won't ever smell anything, but we stay away from the more offensive smelling strains of cannabis. There's a lot to choose from, and we we look for, among the beneficial effects of the resins from the plant itself. We also select for plants that don't have a negative aroma. They're definitely, you're still going to smell something occasionally, but we have plans to add additional odor control system as we expand, including some fan units on the outside that will also add to the odor control system that is in there. That's
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard from many in the community that they are concerned that the nature of the technology dealing with odor is essentially a masking technology, that it may remove the smell but doesn't necessarily remove the substance, and there was concern about is there a health impact, is there some sort of an impact that individuals will experience from the fact that the fumes are in the air, though masked, and as part of that, I hear from growers that there's a concern that the fumes will may affect crops, products around being grown around the greenhouse as well. Could you address those issues for us?
Sure. So the technology we're using is actually a deodorizing technology. So it's misting into the exhaust stream from the fans. And as far as I understand it, it's actually deodorizing the terpenes, which are responsible for the aroma. So I think that's the first question. The underlying one, too, is terpenes themselves are not the molecules that are responsible for any sort of euphoria or high in cannabis. And so in terms of exposure to the aromas, if that was one of the concerns, it really is just the smell. It's not something that's going to intoxicate anybody. And the reason for that is that the cannabinoid resins are actually volatile above 100 degrees Celsius, and the terpenes are volatile around 22 degrees Celsius. So that's why you smell them, but the resins actually stay within the plant until they're heated.
It's also, as
Okay.
you have explained before too, it's the same as the aroma from any other flower, or there's nothing different. There's no, no chemical that is going to affect anything. It's just a flower aroma.
So I think that actually that's a good point. So for example, one of the most predominant ones is myrcene, and that's also found in hops. That's the aroma of hops. Another one would be linalool, which is found in lavender, limonene from citrus plants, pinene from pine. These are common in cannabis. They produce a lot of them, and they produce them in a bouquet of aroma, so you do get quite a complex number of aromas from cannabis plants, but they are the same molecules found in other generally consumed crops.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it sounds like there's a fairly high level of confidence on your part, at least, that the terpenes, I think you call them, are the same substance that flowers, other plants would give off, and there's no health issue associated with those as a result of coming in contact with that. We hear, for example, of at least one person with asthma being affected by those aromas. Can you comment on that?
Well, I know in our workplace where the aromas are most intense during processing in terms of breaking the plant down, some of the staff will wear a mask in order to have dust and overwhelming aromas minimized. So I know that it can be something that somebody in a workplace would take protective issues on. But in terms of the crop itself and the levels that you're perceiving outside the facility, I don't think we're dealing with anything that would cause those concerns.
I see. And from time to time, obviously, there's technical failure because smells escape the technology and go into the community. Why does that happen? How often does that happen? Is it expected that it's going to go on for very much?
The odor control system uses oils in the system. So I mean, it occasionally you'll have a unit that will run out of the oils that are deodorizing. So that can happen, and I'm sure as time goes on, we'll find a way to get an automated way to know if that happens. But that's right now that has to be checked manually.
I think a lot of it too has to do with air currents, depending on what's happening outside. You may have still air, you may have fast-moving air, and I think that can influence what's happening in and around the greenhouse.
And so those odors leave the grounds and affect the properties around around your property. Let's talk about light.
Counselor, before you do that, I'm going to just open it up and see if there are other
Absolutely.
counselors that want to talk about
Yeah.
odor issues, because I think it seems
Absolutely.
like you're going to go into different
I have a
sections.
number.
And
I have the number, yeah.
any other questions that counselors have that may not have been covered under the questioning that Counselor Ribbiak had regarding odor?
No.
Counselor Pap?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So when you talk about the systems that you use to control the odor, this may sound simple, but I just want to understand. Is this the type of system that is standardized amongst all other production facilities, or is this something that is utilized based on the operators like yourselves? Or I'll give you the example on Foss Road, as my colleague, Councilor Durley, we've run into this constantly. And I just wondered, is this a standardized type of, is this a prerequisite that this was to be used? Or do they have discretion on what they can use or not use for odor control?
There's a choice of several systems that you can use.
Right.
It is a requirement to have an odor control system in place, and there are several options, and it's up to the operator to find an option that works well and to remain compliant.
In terms of those options, I can also speak to the fact that a number of other producers have actually requested our assistance with designing their systems, given the fact that we've had a great deal of success with our system. And so we've actually helped Canopy and others with their odor control system. So there are options out there, but Can Trust has been regarded as having one that's working better than average.
Thank you.
Quickly, so what I'm hearing though is, if I decide to build something like this, is there a legislative how to say,
Requirement.
standard requirement that Health Canada would say that, Mr. Papi, if you're gonna build this, you gotta meet these types of technical standards, or is it more open-ended?
It's open-ended, and there's a requirement to do something about emission of odors, but
Right.
that's as specific as the legislation gets. Doesn't mandate any particular levels or types of technology that are permissible, just that something must be in place.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor King had a question about odor as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In rural Ontario, we are used to times of year that we smell manure, depending on shift of the wind. Is the odor associated with the growth of cannabis sort of isolated to specific times of the year, or is it something that one can expect to have the odors from year-round?
It's definitely a year-round operation. The way that we produce flowers is a continuous process. I think it's more the seasonality that influences aromas, and of course, people are outside more in the summertime. So this is most likely the time where they're going to raise issue with it. There may be the same amount in the wintertime, but because people are out less, and because the temperature is lower, which leads to less carry of aromas, then you may have less. But the greenhouse itself produces all year round.
Okay.
Further to that too, when ventilation is less, then there's not as much ventilating from the greenhouse. So in colder weather, there's less ventilation as well from the greenhouse.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, speaking of the ventilation, is it so that during very humid periods of the summer, that you are required to actually open your ventilation more, thereby letting out more of the odor?
Just for the plant health, like the plant can't get too hot, so it's in hot, humid weather, you're at maximum ventilation, but also hot, humid weather tends to be more still, dense air, so you will find more of the aroma hanging around rather than being blown away.
But just to be clear, there's nothing that would bypass the odor control system. It would just be how fast the fans are running.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other odor questions? I just had a question in relation to the answer that was given to Councillor Papp. My understanding from working with not your facility, but with another facility in town that has had significant odor issues, is that it is a requirement that no odor escapes from the facility. And yet we heard that isn't a requirement. It's you used some other word, but, so can we just hear a little bit more about that? I understood it was part of the license, and I don't have it in front of me, but when we looked at other areas, it was specific saying no odor emitted under the regulation, et cetera.
I'd have to refer to the specific legislation, which is about to change on Wednesday. But as far as I recall, the intention of the language is that you must do something about odors. It's not a zero tolerance measure, but it's written largely ambiguously, so you could interpret it, I suppose, or argue interpretation.
Okay, that's
I think
different than what I
Mr.
heard.
Mayor, I think what you also heard Mr. Ravensdale say earlier was the nature of the system being used is open to some discretion. When he was responding to Councillor Papp, and they were saying that their system is one of the better ones, whereas there are other systems available that may not be as good.
Thank you, so noted, thanks. Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as you mentioned, Wednesday, it clued something in on me. Right now, you're in the business of just medical marijuana. Is this true?
That's correct.
After it becomes legal for recreational, will you be shifting gears and getting into that as well?
So the product grown in the greenhouse is kind of agnostic to the sales channel. We produce the bulk production here, and it's sent to Vaughan for distribution after manufacturing and packaging. So currently, the only route for consumers is through the medical sales distribution channel. But on Wednesday, that will now open up recreational sales, and so our products will also appear in that channel.
The product that you're growing now, through you, Mr. Mayor, the product that you're growing now is actually conducive to recreational use as well?
Yes, it does not distinguish until the point of sale.
Okay, and the only difference is that the hallucinatory or the high part of it, you're taking out to make the oils for medicine, right?
Actually, there's quite a diversity. So we have products that have no or very little THC, which is responsible for the euphoria. But THC is also powerful in terms of dealing with pain, especially chronic pain. And so a mixture of both CBD and THC is indicated in for a number of people. So we produce a lot of different products with varying concentrations of THC and CBD.
Okay. And you did mention that the specific species that you're growing is one that is not heavy in the odor producing.
Specifically in the skunk side.
Okay.
So most of our crop is for CBD. About, I'd say, 2/3 of the plants we're producing are CBD producing. And the particular strain that we have that produces CBD is the one that is responsible for kind of a tangerine smell. Orange creamsicle is what most people would refer to it as. So much different spectrum on a aroma wheel than a skunk smell.
Okay. As you expand, will you be using different species that may be more offensive smelling?
Well, we're focusing mostly on the fruity and floral sections of the kind of bouquet wheel. We found that there's a lot of comprehension by consumers for these aromas. So we focused, for example, our recreational products are strawberry breeze. We have a pink grapefruit product, and so they're mostly fruity and floral for both consumer reasons, but also because we perceive them as being more pleasing to produce in the community.
So it's not anticipated that as you expand that other aromas may be generated?
Just more fruity and floral ones.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, I'll turn it back to Councillor Ribbiak for the next line of questioning, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't mean this to sound prosecutorial in that way, but I guess it comes out that way. So we were talking, or starting to talk about light pollution. There are times when at night, in the evening, there's just a huge amount of light being emitted by the facilities as they currently exist. You're proposing to add 700,000 more feet. Is that 700,000 more square feet of light emitting facility, or let's talk about that, because that's obviously an area of great concern to a lot of people.
Gentlemen.
In the current facility, first of all, it's as I'm sure you know, it's a renovation. So we've moved from a ornamental flower producing to a cannabis producing greenhouse, and there's always some growing pains when we bring on a new range, and sometimes, as a matter of fact, probably 2 weeks ago, I drove by myself, and there was light coming out, and then we work with it to make sure that the shade systems are are working better and get the light subdued more. And I think if anyone has noticed the last few nights, it certainly is under control. But moving forward into a new facility, everything is planned ahead of time. So you know, all the light blocking shade curtains would be put in at the right height for. It's actually much easier to work with a new build than it is with a retrofit. So it definitely will be a lot smoother sailing experience with the new facilities. We're also intending to do a lot less supplemental lighting on the new facility.
I see. Well, those are my questions on lights. I have other
Anyone,
questions.
anyone else on lighting? Councillor Lane?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. You're saying on the new expansion that you're gonna do something, it'll be easier to control the light and that, but that doesn't do anything for what's existing now, right?
No, but we are continuing. That's what I'm saying. I think that you know, anyone who's up the last couple of nights looking will notice that there's definitely a big improvement now. But you know, we work with the shade supply companies locally, and I've had them in last week, I guess, just looking at the systems to see how we can improve it. We are definitely sensitive to that. Like both Michael and I and several other key people in the operation live nearby. We're very concerned about our community as well, and you know, it's no intention to be a bad neighbor or to make things unpleasant in Pelham, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you. Others on lights? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next thing I want to talk about is parking. Parking at your facility has attracted a lot of attention. There's obviously not enough of it, or hasn't been. I mean, you see the cars that are parked along the road on the road allowance where the ditches are. I know that there is some additional land that has been converted to parking lot, but that's pretty full. So I guess my first question is with regard to your plans with regard to parking. I've seen some reference to it in the drawings that came with Mr. Richardson's presentation. Is it going to be enough?
Yes, we've had to refigure all of our parking needs, and we've now designed it to be sufficient to the facility at capacity, and that's included on the sketch that you have now. So our parking issues should be largely resolved now.
And that would happen when, approximately, you
The
think?
gravel's in, and I believe we're just waiting for the pavers, which will be before the end of this month. because
Okay,
a lot
so
of-
within weeks, the current situation. More sensitive to that with regard to parking. What is reported, and I don't know the details of the fact, but what's reported is that your employees will go to the parking lot, into the cars, presumably smoking, and not necessarily tobacco. So I guess there are a couple of things that we need to know. Number one, what is the access to your product by your employees? And number two, are they allowed to go out to their cars in the break? I guess smoke whatever it is that they want to smoke. And then third, just talk a little bit about your employment standards around working under the influence of anything at all. There must be some sensitivity to that, given the nature of the industry that you're in. So can you talk about those things?
Are you able to address some of those questions?
Oh, of course, yeah. So
Okay, thank you.
I think, first of all, as an employer, we have a policy, and no recreational cannabis is permitted under our policy. It's the same as alcohol. You can't come to work impaired. Now, we have users who are using medically, and that's treated like other medications. Where you have a medication that may cause intoxication, you have an obligation to disclose to the employer, and the employer has an obligation to now accommodate. And so we do that, and we ensure that any employees who are consuming any products, whether they be cannabis or other products that are going to cause impairment, that they have duties that are suitable to those conditions. And we also need to understand frequency and types of products specifically related to cannabis. And so we've done our best to have a policy and to also be compliant with employment standards. But we've also looked at it as now we have legislation from the province in terms of what's actually going to be mandated at that level. And it's going to be treated very much like cigarettes, and so we need to ensure that if there are people who are consuming for medical reasons, that it's away from the entry by 9 meters. And so we've decided to put in designated areas that are away from the parking lots and further back so that people can consume their medications as appropriate and indicated by a doctor without causing any unintended consequences to those around them.
And to answer your question about access, there is absolutely no product that can go directly to anyone from our facility. We're a producer, and we send everything to Vaughan. There's no absolutely zero product that is available for employees or for anyone else for that matter.
Okay. So for clarity, what you're saying is that like any other workplace, you're going to designate areas where smoking can occur, smoking of tobacco or cannabis, I guess?
We're going to separate the two.
Are you going to separate the two?
Yeah, I think the logic was also both ways, but we've configured that people consuming a medicine that wouldn't necessarily be right to obligate them to consume that in the presence of tobacco if they weren't tobacco smokers, and vice versa. If you're a tobacco smoker and didn't want to be around cannabis smoke, that you shouldn't be in the same spot. So we've decided to have separate spots.
Right, and you have policies in place about working under the influence of anything at all?
That's
And I'm assuming that you have some process by which you can police that. Your supervisors have some training, can you talk about that a little bit? Fill in those
That's
blanks?
been implemented through our HR program, and so we've been rolling out a lot of policy and doing a lot of training on policy, and that's an ongoing effort. That's something that happens every single day.
Okay, and just that last part, the little detail about people having access to their vehicles during the workday. In order to do that, can you talk about that a little bit? Is that actually allowed? And I don't recall that being part of the workplace when I was working, but that was some time ago, so it may have all changed.
Well, in the summertime in particular, people like to get out and enjoy the weather, and so we've created a picnic table area, and some people will choose to go to their cars for whatever reason. Some people eat their lunch in their car. We haven't had really any issues there. So I think from my perspective, we don't have problems with what's going on in terms of people accessing their cars. It seems to be a normal part of the day.
It is at lunchtime though, for clarity. So like we have staggered lunch times, and so that's, it's not like somebody can just walk out to their car.
But it may look like that from the outside.
Yeah, because we have staggered lunch times, it may, but it's a lunchtime access.
Hang on. Mr. Mayor, perhaps others have
Yeah,
questions on
let's see
that?
if there's something about parking and staggered lunch times and anything else on parking. Councillor King?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, someone had mentioned earlier that there are a number of employees working at CanTrust who are residents of Pelham. It seems to me that somewhere along the line in the last few weeks that I may have seen an email to Recreation, Culture, and Wellness with respect to transportation opportunities that may be made available so that you will have more employees taking transit to get there, which would alleviate probably some of your parking problem. I'm just wondering if you have any update on that.
I'm actually waiting to hear back on that, but the
Okay.
the question is being raised, and that's something that I think would potentially be a big benefit to us and to employees, because we have people coming from all over into our facility, and if we had more room in the parking area, that would be great, and if people had public transportation to get in as an option, that would be great as well. So that's a conversation that's underway, and I'm just waiting to hear back on what we can do about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? Parking? Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk about employment. Mr. Richardson made some reference to some of what I was interested in talking about. He talked about conditions, and in this case, I guess pay that is salaries, benefits, opportunities for advancement and improvement, employment security, those sorts of things. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is it, for example, permanent full-time work? Is it shift work? Is it just fill in those gaps, if you don't mind, a little bit?
It's all full-time employment, and we have been pleasantly surprised actually how many good quality employees we've been able to to find locally. And as we said earlier, there's no offshore labor, and we prefer to keep it that way. We have really engaged people. We do tours through often with investors and so on, or some of you have been through, and we often get the comment about how engaged and how happy the employees are. We have a very good workplace that we're proud of. We start everyone, almost everyone anyway, at a entry-level position, and then offer opportunities for advancement as we open new ranges. There's a manager and an assistant in each greenhouse range that opens. There's opportunities for supervisors in trimming and cleaning. We have lots of opportunities, and we always give the first opportunity for advancement from within, and by far most of the advancement does come that way. So it's very proud of it. It is a very good place to work.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you made reference to no migrants. Someone had suggested to me as I was going from door to door that the reason that there are no migrants is because you've been directed by the government not to hire any, that otherwise you would be using them. Do you just want to comment on that?
Certainly not. I mean, that has not been our thinking. I don't know, Michael has a lot more knowledge on what is allowed and what's not allowed, but that has not been our reasoning at all. Our reasoning has been, this is working great, and we've got a great staff, and very pleased with how it's working, and there's been no need to go anywhere else. Are we regulated that way, or is that?
No, it's been definitely by design. So the facility itself produces continuously. It's meant to be more of a manufacturing environment, and hours are largely set, 9 to 5, in this case more 7 to 4. But it's attracting people who want to have regular full-time work. And so we've been able to have a strength where other competitors have had a weakness. And in particular, I think there was a news article about one of our competitors who couldn't get enough labor to harvest almost 15,000 plants. And this was just recently. And so it's really quite different what we're doing. And the reason we don't have migrants is because we don't have to use that program. If there weren't people who were continually applying to come into our labor, we would have to look for other options, but that's not the case. We've got a lot of very good qualified people coming through the door, and it's really been our strength.
Right. So the comment that was made to me through you, Mr. Mayor, was that this is agricultural work that does not need to even come up to minimum pay, and without any benefits and without any security or anything like any other farm situation, people can be let go. It doesn't sound like the situation that exists within your facility, at least.
No, that's definitely not the case. There's, as was mentioned before, everyone has started above minimum wage and full-time employment, and if there's overtime, they're paid for overtime. If they come in on a statutory holiday, they're paid well for that. It's nothing like that at all.
Do you offer your employees stock options?
Yeah, I'd say the two other pieces that really stand out are medical benefits, which are not commonplace in most agricultural industry, and stock options. And so this is kind of owing to the startup nature of the company. And it sounds funny to speak of a startup at 270 people, but it's happened within a year. And during that time of rapid growth, it's really important to have everybody vested in the interests for themselves personally and in the company. And that's part of how we create our culture. But every single full-time employee has the option to purchase stock as part of their employment agreement. And there's been over 1 million options granted through our site. So that's, if they were to have the underlying value, that's more than $14 million in terms of what market price would be today. So we give ownership to our employee at their option.
Thank you. One of the things that has been said is that the nature of the person that comes to work is questionable, to be generous. Do you go through, or do your employees go through some form of screening process, police criminal records, that sort of thing? Given the nature of the industry, there would probably be some concern about security from that perspective. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep, that's part of our policy. So for a job interview, criminal record check, you need to have that coming in from a local detachment. If you're hired and you're likely to have a spot that's going to be in a supervisorial capacity, you need to go through an RCMP background check. And so this is now what would be similar for a casino gambler in terms of, or for a casino card dealer, in terms of 6 degrees of separation from organized crime, filing tax returns and things like that. And so a great deal of our employees have achieved that. And so there's first and foremost a criminal background check and then an RCMP check on top of that for managers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have one or two more questions, and then perhaps we can.
Okay, is it regarding employment?
It is regarding
I encourage you to
employment. It is regarding
Draw it
employment.
together, Counselor.
Beg your pardon?
I encourage you to
Yes.
focus it a little.
Absolutely. So tell me about the range of occupations that you have. Obviously, you've been talking about entry-level positions, but I'm hearing about supervisory, technical. Obviously, there's administrative trades, managerial, use of local contractors for trades, that sort of thing. Can you talk about what the span of occupation is within your industry that goes beyond just the, I guess, the first level or entry-level labor that you've been talking about?
For sure. So I mean, the general manager for the site, and then the operations manager, director of cultivation, is kind of the two most senior employees under Michael. And then we're dealing with a series of managers in terms of quality and compliance, HR, health and safety. And then within the operations tree, we're dealing with shipping, receiving, and inventory, as well as vault inventory, which is a more controlled inventory, dealing with all of the drying staff and the curing staff, the processing staff and all the supervisors. The cultivation is broken down by growing area, so each of the growing areas has a supervisor and a lead role. And then there's the sanitation team, which is working around the clock to keep the facility spotless. Very organized labor there. Greenhouse construction is something that we've brought into the company, so we have a greenhouse engineer and a greenhouse construction manager, and under them a series of leads and senior technicians in terms of greenhouse construction. For non-greenhouse construction, we employ a general contractor, and they're contracting out work to various trades, electricians, mechanical, civil engineering as well. And then we also have a number of things that are specific to greenhouse trades as well, in terms of all the curtains and the lightings and the cooling pads and the fans and structures themselves. So it's quite wide, and we're touching a big part of the community, both directly and indirectly.
I see.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Counselor King, you had some questions earlier, and then I see Counselor Durley.
Most of my questions have been answered, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You did mention processing. To what degree do you process your product?
So we cut the plants from the rootstock, and then we remove the flowering stems, and then we take the flowers off of those stalks, take the leaves off of those flowers, and then dry those flowers. Once they're dried, we'll cure them, and this is mostly to ensure that there's uniform moisture content in large flower and small flower. And then those flowers will be sorted into different sizes. And then for the largest flowers, we'll end up doing a hand trimming in order to improve the appearance of the product. And then it's packed into 10-kilo bulk packages and stored in inventory pending shipment to Vaughan.
Okay. The Assessment Act says if you produce, manufacture, or process anything, you're not agricultural, you're industrial. Now, are you touching upon a process that would take you away from the actual agriculture?
I would argue not, but I think it's a point that can be considered. I think that what we're doing is generally producing a dried herb, and anybody who is producing a dried herb would go through the same process. I think it's generally regarded as agricultural or horticultural. I think if you take an extension, you might look at maple syrup production, if that was looked at as industrial or agriculture.
It is.
Which one?
It's industrial.
Okay, so that
If
might
you
be
take the sap and make syrup, it's industrial.
So that might be the line that you would draw, is when you're condensing the material from a plant. So in that case, you'd be looking at extraction as being kind of the start of an industrial process. But again, I think it's all brand new, and it's a conversation that we should follow up on.
It's something definitely we need to look at. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Others? Counselor Lee.
Not on anything there, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but is going forward as this expands here in town, is there any thought been given to the possibility of moving the Vaughan facility down to this neck of the woods to do away with the transport and what have you, and move that facility down here? Has there been any thought whatsoever given to that?
To be honest, the focus so far has been on cultivation, but the success here has been one that the company has taken note of and said, okay, this has been a very successful operation for us. Is there something more we should consider with the community? But I think we need to understand more fully, from council, what the intentions are here, and so that we can make further plans. But for now, we've really focused on agricultural operations here. I think I need a little more information from council in terms of the direction we're going to be able to take that conversation along.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Counselor. Others? Counselor Pap?
On more general,
Sure, yeah.
excuse me, just so I understand, you currently have 400,000 square feet through you, Mr. Mayor, correct?
380,000 in greenhouse and 100,000 in header house.
And you want to add another additional 700,000?
Yeah, and that's a mixture of a barn structure and a greenhouse structure.
The current production, the current products that, or the things that you're doing now are for medicinal purposes, is that correct?
That's our revenue today.
That's your revenue stream. If you move ahead with the additional square footage, would that be a mixture of both recreational and medicinal, or?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. So the products from our facility now are going into both streams. And so we are continuing with both the medical and recreational as well as international medical opportunities. So the products that are grown at CanTrust here in Pelham would arrive to Canadian medical users, international medical users, and Canadian non-medical users.
But in effect, those products will be then distributed through your Vaughan facility, right? You're not going to be distributing anything here, are you?
That's correct. All distribution, be it directly to the client or to the provincial distribution system, is through the Vaughan facility.
So is it anticipated that if you, with the additional construction, more employment, I would presume?
Yes.
Can you give us a rough guess?
I think we could be closing up to 500 people if we were to
In
put
total.
the entire thing out.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Any other counselors? I have just a couple of questions. There was a comment in the presentation about non-pesticide use. You don't use pesticides, and I did have a tour back in June, and I saw the little things that you use, et cetera, in terms of pest control and things like that. But I also spoke to someone today who's farming in that area that has said that you're quite concerned about their pesticide use. Can you comment on that?
Oh, we don't want pesticides from farms coming into the facility. So, if we're aware of somebody close by spraying, then, we'll make every effort to shut off the fans so that we're not potentially pulling in any contamination into the greenhouse. All products are tested, and, we have to ensure the purity of the product.
Okay, thank you. This might be, maybe you're not able to answer this question, but I think Mr. Richardson may know sort of a bit more for this, given his history. Councillor Durley's question about industrial uses and things, and usually my understanding of our rules and regulations is that once you kind of cross that boundary into industry, you need a site plan control. Site plan control would include things like water, it would include parking, buffering, paving, those kind of things. Are you able to tell us whether you would be open to going under site plan control for your new facility? Maybe you haven't discussed it.
We've not discussed that, Mr. Mayor. I'll let the gentleman answer. We've not examined your site plan control bylaw, but I understood that agricultural uses are exempt.
That's correct.
And not to quarrel with what Councillor Durley said earlier, but there's some rules for taxation that don't apply in the planning sense. And as your planner will advise you, this province recognizes agricultural uses as including value added. So you have things like breweries and wineries, for example, both of which are permitted in the agricultural area, most specifically in this region, but elsewhere as well. And so we would say to you, we are clearly an agricultural operation.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you want to comment on that. Maybe you don't know is,
I don't think it would be possible to comment on it without more information on the spot.
okay. It would mean that, so maybe it's not, that's why I said it may not be a fair question, but it would mean that it's not only a building permit, but also looking at the site, the impacts on other properties, those kind of things as well. And it would go through a whole process with staff, and that would have to be approved by council in the end. Think of another agricultural operation. I'm looking at Councillor Lane because he brought forward some concerns of neighbors in that situation with refrigeration trucks at UFD when they were expanding, and they were able to address it under their site plan. So it's just kind of an idea that I have rolling around in my head in terms of perhaps a way forward. So, but you may not be able to answer that at this point, so thank you for that. Unless there's any other questions from council at this point, I want to thank you very much. Sorry, was there? I want to thank you very much for your presentation and for answering questions for 45 minutes in front of council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we do have a motion moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane. Be it resolved, the delegation by Mr. Richardson and others on behalf of CanTrust Inc. regarding the proposed interim control bylaw relating to cannabis operations be received for information. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We have a resident, David Ireland, who's here, who would also like to present regarding the interim control bylaw. Thank you very much, Mr. Ireland, for joining us this evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present my concerns before council. My name is David Ireland, and I am here on behalf of the Pelham Community Preservation Coalition and also the majority of the residents in the town of Pelham. Before I proceed, I would like to thank Mayor and Council for giving me this opportunity to speak. On behalf of the residents who are in support of the interim control bylaw for all current and future licensed cannabis production facilities within the boundaries of our town. And I am here today to urge Council to implement that bylaw immediately before any further permits are issued. Friday, September 14th, I met with approximately 150 town residents, and they shared the same concerns that I myself did about these unrestricted operations. I do have 127 signatures, there were roughly 140 people that were there, and 127 signatures, and I can distribute copies to you people after if you require them.
Thank you.
As was pointed out at that meeting, Pelham now has 6 licensed producers, with others wanting to set up shop, one being directly beside my property. On each occasion, residents have not been able to share their views and concerns, and our residents were led to believe that our town council has no ability to mitigate the impact that these operations have here. But that is simply not the case, and there are now residents who live negatively, or who are now negatively impacted by these facilities, and the landscape of our community will be changed forever if this ICB is not implemented. And there will be further degradation to our town. Cannabis is not like other crops that we have growing in our farms, and they need a specific set of parameters. There's no scientific data presently available to determine adequate setback distances nor impact on surrounding residential properties, schools, and farms, and without knowing what the impact is, we are no more than test subjects that our federal government is learning from, and little thought was ever given to what implications their decision to legalize this current illegal drug will have. Our own residential properties are very close to these current producers, and there are homes where families and children live. And we have been hearing from the media or just by word of mouth from these residents for some time now about how Pelham residents that are even more than 1 kilometer from these facilities that are negatively impacted, not to mention the majority that are directly surrounding them. Our present comprehensive zoning bylaw does not address this, and it needs to. Of course, odor and light pollution are most pervasive. Under provision 61 of the Access to Cannabis for Medical Purposes regulations, it clearly states, Health Canada regulates medical cannabis producers and requires that facilities are equipped with an air filtration system to prevent the escape of pollen and odor. It is not just masking it. There has to be zero odor. It states that right in provision 61. Throughout Canada, there are problems in communities where producers have not yet solved the problem of odor, and Pelham is unfortunately one of those communities. Most recently, we've been hearing from what is now happening to our agricultural land. The land which makes Pelham so picturesque, and that agricultural land in our immediate area is being consumed by these operations. The lucrative crop appears to create a situation where if a producer wants the land badly enough, there will be enough cash available to get it. Even if our own town residents offer more than the asking price, these corporations counteroffer with a higher amount. We are competing with people that have no concern for our town's well-being, and they do not live here. It is purely a financial decision to them, and they have seemingly endless supplies of cash and many investors. Mr. Richardson had pointed out that his client is asking for an exemption to the ruling we are asking Council to implement. That request in itself is ridiculous, and the one main reason we are asking for one main reason is because we're asking for this interim control bylaw so that we can manage such issues before these producers can do more harm than they already have. You as councillors have the ability to take control of the situation, and you need to do it before it is too late. And should council request the exemption to Mr. Richardson's client, the town will need to consider legal action which is likely to come from other operations being denied similar requests. You cannot make an exception for one and not the others. Residents fear for the degradation of town lands due to the infrastructure's demands on water, electricity and drainage, along with increased traffic and the need for increased policing and more. Environmentally, there are so many unknowns. We do know that their carbon footprint is very large. And we are all aware that the responsibility is left upon the town and region to maintain the infrastructure of the area. Maintenance of roads, etc., will become the burden of the town and the taxpayers, and not these cannabis companies. Our roads are already seeing the impact from increased traffic, and these expansions are only going to make things worse. Mr. Councillor Ribiak mentioned about job creation a couple of weeks ago. And most of the jobs are not being taken by people that are local in our town. Most are from out of the area, some as far as Hamilton. These people are not spending their money in town. They make their money and they go home and they spend their money elsewhere. And taxes are no different either. The agricultural land is already taxed as an agricultural zone, and with the greenhouses on there will be no additional tax revenues for the town. Local income from construction-related materials, from plants, etc., is virtually non-existent, as we have found that the majority of the materials to build these facilities come from offshore sources. These companies make claims of helping the local economy. However, how will this affect our town? Many people from all over flock here to enjoy the simple peace and quiet, and many of us live here for the same reason. We do have tourism around the area, not directly related to Pelham, but there are areas around here like wines, and there are the fruit growers, flowers, etc. what will be left if we become the cannabis capital of Canada? The official plan, which according to the town's website is overdue for review, will also give the residents a vision of where we want our town to be in the near future. In addition to looking at that plan, this interim control bylaw will allow staff time needed to research and create specific bylaws addressing cannabis production facilities in both agricultural and industrial areas. As a whole, we as residents would like to be part of what our town's future will be so that we can thrive as a community and be happy to say that we are proud to be living in the town of Pelham. Our residents are proud of our town. Help us continue to feel proud by passing this interim control bylaw. Let's take the time needed to make good informed decisions. There's a great urgency to pass this bylaw so as to stop these producers from getting a stronger foothold. I urge you as councillors that represent us as residents that you seriously think before making a rash decision to allow an exemption and to listen to what our townspeople are saying. The people of this town want this interim control bylaw set in place with no exemptions. I thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Ireland, for your presentation. Questions from members of council to Mr. Ireland? Mr. Ireland, just, you made a number of comments there, just, and that's from your own research? Is that how you've done it?
Yeah, we have a committee that's done some research on the whole.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
We have a committee that has done research on the industry, so.
Okay.
We're just concerned that we've got a town here that has crops, that has like a ton of agricultural property. And this agricultural property, you take Balfour, for instance, where Cantrust is, and they just purchased a large parcel of property, and they're gonna put 700,000 square feet of greenhouses, tear down orchards, which have already half been torn down, already put parking lots in, and they're gonna have 500 employees driving in and out of this place. It's gonna be an industrial town that we're gonna be living in. That's just one on the north end of town. Then you go down to Foss Road at the southeast end of town, it's exactly the same thing there. They're just gonna be buying up property because they can, they've got an unlimited supply of cash. There's no way to compete with these guys. If we put a number of farmers together, we can't even compete with a couple of $1 million because they got $5 million. So we can't just have them completely just taking over without anything in place so that you can, as councillors and mayor, can actually figure out what can be done. We're test subjects. Pelham is a test area, and the government just left it upon you guys and us to see where it's going to go. And honestly, it needs to stop before it goes somewhere where we can no longer control.
Thank you. You made that point very well, both in your presentation and in the questioning. You also said at the beginning of your presentation, I didn't see it here in your written, but there's a group, and there was an ad in the paper. What's the name of the group? The Pelham?
The Pelham Community Preservation Coalition.
Okay. And is that the group that?
That's the group
That's the
that
group
I
that put in
formed.
that ad in the paper?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. I just didn't know what that was.
Okay.
So I appreciate you explaining that it is linked with what you're doing and other folks that participated in the meeting that you called in the middle of September.
Yep. The other one of the points, if I may just make as well, is if the bylaw is not put in place, the interim control bylaw is not put in place very soon, Cantrust will get their permit and they will expand to
Right.
1.2 million square feet. Then we're going nowhere. We're going backwards.
Okay, thank you.
So it's really important.
Thank you. You also mentioned that you had some signatures, or is that a
Yeah, I did.
petition? Is that
Yeah.
what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd encourage you at some point to present that to the clerk, and then council can actually formally receive the petition. So we hadn't done that. We haven't received any petitions. This issue came up because Councillor King brought forward a motion at our last meeting to encourage the idea of an interim control bylaw. So it would be helpful as well to not only lend the voice of what you're saying and the group, but also those 127 signatories. So I'd encourage you to bring that petition to the clerk perhaps at the end of the meeting or tomorrow or something so that we can get it on a council agenda and receive it. Thank you. I wonder if members of council have any questions for you, Mr. Ireland, and Councillor Durley does.
Thank
Go ahead,
you, Mr.
Councillor.
Mayor. Not necessarily a question, but perhaps an observation and a statement. There's a perception that we as council or the town has invited these people to come in and take over the greenhouse operations, which is absolutely not the case. They took the opportunity to purchase existing greenhouses, and they are growing an agricultural crop. So, in fact, the perception that we invited them or that the town invited them is completely false.
Yeah, I didn't mean it in that way.
It just, the perception
I
seemed to
know,
come
yeah.
through that.
My apologies, yeah. It's,
Okay.
and we're aware it's got nothing to do with you people exactly inviting them in, but it's just the regulation that they're an agricultural crop and they can just come in and just continue as though they were growing flowers. And I understand that it wasn't you particularly.
And also, we have much
you.
difficulty, our bylaw people can tell you that communication with Health Canada has been very
yeah.
difficult as well. They say they make regulations, and there's absolutely no way that they can be enforced. So our hands really were tied in a lot of situations that are here that are of concern to the general public, and I just want to make that clear as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unless there's any other questions, we'll get into a discussion next. So thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks to all those residents who are here supporting you, the signatories, et cetera. And again, we look forward to... Thanks very much. We look forward to receiving that petition. So it has been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King. Be it resolved that the delegation by David Ireland regarding the proposed interim control bylaw relating to cannabis facilities be received for information. And Mr. Ireland, you presented something slightly different than what was in the package. I would just ask you to consider. You can also submit that, and we can include it in the package, okay? Thank you very much. So I'm going to call the question on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Thank you. So council did move up a couple of items. The first item was 941. I'm sorry, 951?
Yep.
951. So it's an AMO briefing, and I'd encourage folks to take a look at that. It talks not only about production, which is what the topic has been this meeting, but also it talks about many different elements of the entire legalization of cannabis, and talks about the framework for municipalities to look at. So I'd encourage people to take a look at that. And I'm going to let me just check my motions here. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Riviak, seconded by Councillor King, that we receive that for information. So that's 951, the AMO briefing. Any members of council like to highlight anything in that at this point? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. So we have received that, and that was circulated with the agenda. It's a few pages here. You'll find it very interesting for those, especially members of the group. You'll find it very interesting in terms of what the Association of Municipalities of Ontario is saying about the entire legalization of cannabis for recreational purposes. And now we move to the consideration of bylaws, and we'll deal with the first one. So it's 14.1. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, third time, and do pass the same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 4046, being an interim control bylaw under Section 38 of the Planning Act, as amended, regarding cannabis-related land uses. So that is on the floor. We do have members, not only our Director of Planning and Development, Ms. Weens, here that we can ask questions to, but also legal counsel, Mr. Callum Shedden is here, regarding any other elements of the bylaw if council so chooses. So we had a mover and a seconder, Durley King. Does the mover and the seconder, you want to speak to the bylaw? Or should we open it up for all members of council? Councillor Durley?
Just have one comment. The information that I have been able to digest is incomplete. There's a lot of questions that I still have, and this is why my big concern is that if we jump into something very quickly, it's a knee-jerk reaction and we may regret it. So there are some things that I think need to come forward, at least for me to understand it completely before I would like to, vote to make a decision on it. And that's just my point of view at this particular point in time. Thank you.
Regarding, sorry, just for clarity, regarding this particular bylaw, is that correct?
Regarding the bylaw and regarding actually
Okay.
what we're going to be regulating as far, and again, the question is the processing. Wineries are treated completely different than canning factories. And, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered as to what actually is going on in the cannabis industry. And that's, to me, unanswered questions that I'd like to have answered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor King?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if the director may be able to assist me here. I have a question with regards to approvals. We know that CanTrust was purchasing an additional piece of property and did so on October the 10th, but I think that deal has not been closed from what we've heard tonight. My question to you is whether the approvals that were processed prior to the motion coming forward on October the 9th, whether they are exempt from a control interim bylaw.
Ms. Weens, can you assist the councillor?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there were some building permits that were approved last week, and so those would not be impacted by the interim control bylaw if council were to pass the interim control bylaw. Those building permits relate to the cogeneration facility that they want to install in their on site to capture, I guess it's the CO2 gases and turn that into energy. And the other building permit was for expansion to their washrooms and locker facilities, staff locker rooms and stuff. So those would not be affected by the interim control bylaw. They did come in on Friday, late Friday afternoon, and make applications for building permits for the greenhouses and the barn structure that you see on that site plan that was provided in the council package. That application has not yet been reviewed to determine if it is complete. We're still in the process of receiving that. So whether or not those applications would be exempt from the interim control bylaw, I think is a matter of whether or not they are complete or not by the time council passes this application. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay, can you just describe what you mean by complete application?
So there are certainly certain types of plans and drawings that they needed to have submitted, 2 sets of all plans and drawings, some engineering specifications with respect to the planning and the systems that they're going to be constructing and installing. They need, if they haven't closed on it, they need the owner's authorization that they're allowed to submit building permits, applications on these lands because they're not the current owners. So there's those requirements under the Ontario Building Code.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, councillor, I jumped in there. Is there anything?
No, that's fine. But yes, I do want to just pull that out a little bit further if I could. Can you just clarify then if the approvals that they have received are related to further expansion, or are they supporting personnel requirements for health and safety? Does it support the
Existing.
already existing operation, or is it something for expansion?
Yes, so Mr. Mayor, through you, the building permits that were issued last week for the cogeneration and the locker rooms is for their current site. It doesn't affect any lands on the lands that they are purchasing.
Okay, thank you, that clarifies.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Councillor Kersey?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a question around the same question that Councillor King was with respect to the building permit. When I look at this interim control bylaw, it talks about use as opposed to a building. So the mere fact that if their building permit application were complete, and we were to pass this interim control bylaw, that speaks more to use than it does to the structure. So they could be allowed to go ahead and build the building, but not to be able to grow cannabis within the building. Would that not be the case on this?
Yeah, perhaps in general, we can have, just if I might, as a precursor to that, can we have the director or Mr. Shedden outline what's being proposed, what it means, and then answering the question specifically, if you don't mind, please.
Certainly. So the interim control bylaw, anything that was legally approved and is lawful today and has been received its approvals, the interim control bylaw would not have any impact on. So the building permits that were issued last week for legally permitted use, this interim control bylaw doesn't have any impact on that.
And it was regarding use versus structure, I guess, was the question of the councillor. So there's specific wording in the bylaw, and if you could just run through, in general, the rationale behind the wording, and then answer the question between use and structure. Could they grow herbs in the structure?
So paragraph 3 states that notwithstanding any other bylaws to the contrary, no person shall, within the interim control area, use any land, building, or structure for any commercial or industrial cannabis purposes whatsoever, except for a use that lawfully existed as of the date of the passage of this bylaw. So that is speaking to the use of land. It's speaking to the use of a building or structure as well.
And then under
And then
B, it says.
Part B says, be permitted to construct, alter, or expand any building or structure for any commercial or industrial cannabis purposes whatsoever, save and except where such construction, alteration, or expansion is a continuation of a lawful use in existence as of the date of passage of this bylaw. So that expansion or alteration has also have to be a lawful use.
Thank you. Councillor?
So am I hearing you right then, Madam Director, that, well, I want to approach it at two ways. They've applied for a building permit, but it has not been processed as of the date of passage of this bylaw. Is the mere fact that they've applied, and if the permit application is deemed to be complete, sufficient to exempt them from this bylaw?
Thank you.
Mr. Shedden, thank you.
Through you to the councillor. The general rule in planning applications and in building permits is the rules you have to meet are those in place on the day you submit a complete application. So in response to your question, if the application was complete as of last Friday, they're under last Friday's rules. So the interim control bylaw would not restrict the issuance of a building permit for construction of a greenhouse on the property, provided it was a complete application. Complete application is something that the chief building official will determine. It's not required that the chief building official have reviewed all these plans and has issued the permit. It's about when the complete application was filed. So I hope that answers your question.
Go ahead, Councillor.
So along
I'll let you
those
say it.
lines, Mr. Shedden, then if we take that permit, it gives them permission to build a structure. It does not give them permission on what they can grow within that structure. Is that correct? It's an,
I guess this goes, Mr. Mayor, this goes through, as you're aware, there's a variety of government levels that weigh in on marijuana or cannabis production. So you have licensing at the federal level, you have regulation at the provincial level, you have regulation through zoning bylaws and building permits at the local level. If you have a building which is legally constructed as a greenhouse, and if the owner of that building has a license from the federal government to produce cannabis, the town will not be able to prevent that use through its zoning bylaw, because the building will have existed legally. So this is the difficulty that all municipalities face in regulating cannabis. There are 3 levels of government, all of which have a separate and distinct role, and you can only regulate in a very small area, and that is with respect to zoning and building permits. So it's difficult for you to prevent something that the federal government says is permitted.
Thank you.
okay, I'll let that level of discussion go right now, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of other things to say, but I
Okay.
defer to
Can
my
we-
colleagues.
Well, you can keep going if you want on other items, Counselor. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, not to beat a dead horse with respect to language, but I'd like to look at Clause 3A. It speaks specifically about the commercial and industrial cannabis purposes. And I did ask our director this afternoon about this, and I've still thought about it. I think we should be inserting the word agricultural in there to make it very clear. Because what happens if 6 months from now, the province enacts open field growing and allows that to happen? I'm not sure that this language would take care of that.
Okay.
So I'd like it to be very clear that we're talking about commercial/retail, industrial/processing, and agricultural/growing. So I think I'd like to move an amendment, Mr. Mayor, to that wording, that we insert the word agricultural as well as commercial or industrial.
Okay. Thank you. So that would be both in 3A and 3B?
Yes.
Which talks about commercial or industrial?
Yes.
In 3B as well. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Rivyak? To that amendment, I was thinking the same thing as it was discussed. I don't know if Mr. Shedden is able to answer the question about open field growing. And can that be regulated by the municipality? I understood that we can regulate sort of what grows or what happens in a building, or in a structure, but not necessarily in the field, or you may not have the answer for that at the moment, but it sounds like it might be an issue next spring. Mr. Shedden?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I haven't had a chance to do the research on that. It's a new area, and again, it's a crop, and if the federal government and the province is allowing it to be grown in open fields subject to regulation, it would have to meet town zoning as well, but you don't zone open field production of anything else.
Right.
So it would, again, this is something we're gonna have to work through. But the language that you're proposing with agriculture in there would give you an opportunity to have that discussion at least.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to the amendment? I'm going to call the question then on the amendment to add the word agriculture to both 3A and 3B. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. The floor is still yours, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this interim control bylaw. I have some concerns with the entire cannabis issue. I think it's been dropped on small municipalities from on high. without any degree of regulation granted or tools granted to the local municipality apart from our ability to control land use planning and the like. We are not, we have not been part of the conversation, but we've been the recipients of the good, the bad, and the ugly. The presenters this evening appear to be legitimate, serious, concerned growers. They seem to treat their employees well. But that's not the issue we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss controlling the impact of this new industry / agricultural use on our community. We've heard from our community for months now regarding the light pollution, regarding the odor, and we've seen in some sectors a lack of desire on the part of the operator to comply with the federal regulations, and certainly we've seen the lack of the federal government in being responsive and providing inspectors to come down here and enforce the regulations. So I will be supporting the interim control bylaw. I think it gives us an opportunity to give due consideration to how we might lessen the impact on our community. I have concerns with traffic and issues with the light and the odor. I think we should be looking at setbacks. We should look at degree of separation. Many agricultural uses require that houses be a certain number of feet away from that particular agricultural use, depending upon the crop, depending on the type of animal that's being raised, how the manure is being dealt with, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe those are things that we need to be concerned about and incorporate in our land use planning. When I look at the scale of this operation and others that are springing up in our community, we're talking much more than a simple agricultural operation. We're talking basically about an industrial operation here where we are paving over significant amounts of good agricultural land with concrete pads, with parking lots, and yet we have no control over stormwater management. Think of the scale of this operation if it were a normal commercial operation or a normal residential development that would be coming before us. We would be demanding a site plan control to deal with those issues and to reduce the impact on the neighboring properties. Those are things that this interim control bylaw will allow us to study and to look into and to incorporate into our new zoning bylaw, our comprehensive zoning bylaw. So for all of those reasons, and for more reasons with respect to the provincial legislation that's about to be passed and dropped on us, with respect to the retail sales of cannabis and how that's going to be managed. Mr. Ford is promising money to small municipalities. How far is $10,000 going to go with respect to policing and regulation and looking after these types of operations? So we're not faced with that right at the present moment, but we are faced with the grow-op situation. I bring the retail up to say that this bylaw also speaks to that, so I think we need to give due consideration to that. So, Mr. Mayor, I will, for all the reasons cited, I will be supporting the interim control bylaw in the form that is presented here at the table tonight. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much. Any others? Councilor Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I too will be supporting this motion without further amendment, at least to the meaning of it, or exemption. It's clear. I mean, it is painfully clear that there is a tremendous disconnect in this community between the intentions and the potentials of this industry and the aspirations of our community. There is a lack of understanding. There is certainly a lack of acceptance. And I don't think I exaggerate too much when I say that a license isn't just a piece of paper. A license to do business is really the permission of your neighbors to let you go ahead and do that. And without that license, it's impossible to succeed for very much longer. So I see that there's an opportunity within this interim control measure which may be good for everyone. I think, first of all, of course, it gives us the opportunity, gives town staff the opportunity to examine the question and to go through the exercise of determining exactly what kinds of zoning regulation is required for this industry, and to come forward with a proposition that I'm sure is going to be debated and ultimately settled. But it's also an opportunity, I would say, it's an opportunity for the industry in this town to work on reaching out to the community and letting the community know what it's all about, what are all the issues. I'm sure we all have the experience when we go from door to door these days of hearing things from people that we know aren't correct, but they are the impressions and they are the perceptions of our people. And the fact that they have those perception creates a very real response. And the only way to deal with that is to make sure that information is available, that education is available, that there's an opportunity for questions to be answered, for people to get to know this. And so this breathing space is an opportunity, I think, for the industry to do something for itself around gaining a necessary level of acceptance from the community that it wants to settle in. And the third thing I would say is that this breathing space allows is for the industry to think about your suggestion, Mr. Mayor, about the extent to which the industry would want to put itself to some extent willingly into the control of the town. Not necessarily town council, but through some process in which plans, development, the future of the industry can be known, can be examined, can be passed on at some level, so that, again, there's the acceptance, there's the understanding, and there's a good prediction of how things will work out. So I see this breathing space as a real opportunity for everyone concerned, and I would hope that that's the way it's going to be looked at. I would hope that it will be looked at positively and constructively that way, and that something good will come out of it as a result. So I'm going to support it, as I said, without any exemptions, without amendment in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Other councillors? Councillor King? I thought you signaled. Did you signal?
I didn't, but I will
Okay.
speak.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, please.
I will keep my comment very brief, and that is that I am supporting the motion that I brought forward 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Papp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I concur with my colleagues. The need for an interim control bylaw at this given point, we need a break. I think, and I share Mr. Ireland's concerns, and let me put it this way. Right now, we have 6 operating plants. They're up and running. But I also want to add something a little different. Is for us to understand the production of this particular substance and its benefits. And I say that from a personal point of view. I've seen what this product can do to ease pain. And as long as we keep in mind the value and the purpose of it, and I'm not without prejudice against our presenters from CanTrust, as long as, and I'm familiar with if we do not go beyond that and try and at least understand and educate and communicate in the same lines of, I think, what Councilor Ribiak said, in many development projects, and my colleagues, we have reached out, worked collaboratively with the people that were affected and talked to them and said, what does this mean? Any bylaw, interim or not, and I'll ask, is subject to change. It's not, and I've said this before many, many years on council, saying it's not etched in stone. It can be changed. subject to whatever is relevant and needs to occur as a result of whatever we are trying to control or administer. At this given point, I am fully supportive. I also respect and understand the production of medicinal cannabis. I am still sitting on the fence and still somewhat concerned, if I may say, and I've said this to some other people about the recreational use and that's a whole other story, that's a whole other debate. But nonetheless, at this stage, I think we need to make sure that what we have here can be built upon, it can be adjusted, and it can be made even more refined so that we are able to not only deal with our current operations, and you're right, Mr. Ireland, if others apply, we got to be sure we have the prerequisites in place, which could include you're not allowed to build here. We don't want you, or we don't need it. So on that basis, I will be in full support of it, and my question is, if mine, Mr. Mayor, to Director of Planning and to Mr. Shedden. So let's say this passes. What happens tomorrow with what you were saying about CANTRUST applications, building, what happens? Is that on hold, or is?
Are you able to answer that?
Or can you answer that, or maybe I'll with?
No, that's okay. Is anyone able to answer that, or are you up to, it was answered a little bit all
I want to get a better
earlier,
understanding what's going to happen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. So we'll be reviewing the application to determine if it's a complete application.
Correct.
And if it is a complete application, then it will be allowed to proceed. If it's not a complete application, then it is caught by the interim control bylaw.
By this particular bylaw.
Yes,
And let's,
You're not able to say that, but the chief building official is that correct?
that's correct.
okay, I'd like to hear furthermore, if it is complete, what does that actually mean? And I don't want to be, forgive me, caught in a dichotomy, you know. So in all fairness to the first presenters, that I think they need to be clear, we need to be clear, we pass a bylaw, no, they're okay to go ahead, no disrespect. But then for future, and that's what I understand, is that we want to be sure that we have the, how to say, checks and balances in place to ensure that. And finally, I would suggest that your group, Mr. Allen, we continue to dialogue with you and work through your research, because there's still a lot of stuff that we still are unsure of. And I'm not just speaking for, I'm speaking for myself. I'm still not clear on a lot of the things that have been happening, but we'll get through it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Others?
I'm a little bit confused.
Sorry, folks, sorry, we're debating right now. Thank you very much. Councillor Lane?
To make a long story short,
Sorry, sir.
I will be supporting this, okay? I believe it's needed at this particular time, and everything else has been said already, so.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Any others? So I do have some comments. I think what's before us in terms of the interim control bylaw is a broader issue. There's a larger issue. Although there are 6 licenses, I believe 2 are very large facilities and one is a medium-sized facility, and the other 3 are sort of for like smaller, and they might be for personal use, and they're medical related. This bylaw is broader because it does deal with, as Councillor Accursi stated, not only medical but also recreational. There have been concerns from the community about this, and we heard that there is a group that's working on this, and more than 100 folks that have expressed concern in a petition that we'll get shortly. There's also the specific issue about this specific site, and we had that delegation earlier, that they were looking for a specific exemption to the bylaw. It seems to me that some of this comes about because, why? Because there's been impacts on, on neighbors. In addition to the rich agricultural soil that Councillor Kersey spoke about, that's kind of turned into a greenhouse. there's the idea of the odor impacts, the light impacts, parking impacts. And I think that cannot be ignored. And I think when CanTrust first opened, didn't have as many employees, and there weren't those impacts, and they were only dealing with the medical component. And now we heard tonight that their product is their product, and it might extend into recreational, which is a much larger market, and therefore something that can be expanded upon. This town has a history with greenhouses, and I see some other greenhouse operators in the audience this evening. And many of those do deal with, although they're not overtly controlled with our current rules and regulations in terms of zoning, they do buffer away from neighbors, they are back from the roadway, they don't have as many employees. Probably this operator prior had about, I think it was 32 employees, and now it's 292 employees. So there wasn't the need for as much parking, and they had the parking in front, et cetera. So I think, and then there's also the question that Councillor Durley raised about use. And there's a trigger point where once something becomes industrial or commercial, it moves over and requires site plan control. And I think that the town, in its history, didn't have that control on agricultural use because it wanted to encourage floriculture. It wanted to encourage vegetable agriculture in greenhouses. And that's why that was in case. I think the interim control bylaw will allow the town council, and working with staff and the community, to formulate those rules and regulations that are required. So we can talk about the issues and solve them and set up specific setbacks, deal with things like water, deal with things like parking, deal with all of those issues. And I'd encourage us to look at the possibility of putting all greenhouses under site plan control so that this doesn't become an issue in the future. We heard, I'll use this specifically, we heard specifically from this proponent this evening that talked about their concerns for pesticides being sprayed on neighboring properties. So they're concerned about an agricultural practice on another property. Flipping that around, as an example, many people are concerned about this agricultural practice on other properties as well. So if there's a concern on the pesticides going into this facility, I think also needs to recognize that there's concerns from things like smell, things like light and the impacts on the community, and those need to be dealt with. The regulation in terms of odor, I've read it. Mr. Ireland, it's pretty clear to me, and we heard something different this evening, that needs to be settled in. My understanding is that no odor is to emanate from the facility, and we had that issue, and we had many, many complaints not on this particular one, but in the Foss Road area. Although many people in Cherry Ridge are commenting about a cannabis smell. So, and it appears at this point anyways that it's that facility on Balfour. I think for all of those reasons, it's prudent for the town to pause, to recognize that there's some growing pains, I think is what the proponent said earlier this evening, in terms of the operation and how quickly they've expanded. I would encourage CanTrust as a good corporate citizen to consider whether they have a complete application or not, to consider going under and using site plan control for any future expansions and approaching the town in a collaborative way on that, so that those issues can be mitigated. concerns of neighbors can be addressed in that process, as opposed to kind of going in with a building permit and not having those controls. We're hearing, as Councillor, and so I'll finally say this, as Councillor Ribbiak indicated, this is the first time that we've heard from the industry regarding this, and we definitely appreciate the specific proponent coming in. I'd encourage continued outreach to the community. That's where the dialogue occurs, where people see the facility. It's amazing inside. I've seen it. And the questions that people ask about, can one get high working there? Can one get high going through there? Do my grandchildren, I'm worried about them being affected if they're outside and the fans are on. All those questions are legitimate questions from the community, and they need to be answered. And I hope that this particular organization, CanTrust, can be here for the long term, that we can work together in a collaborative way. But I think at this time, the most prudent thing to do is to take a bit of a pause and to work together to solve these issues. For the specific issue, as I talked about, but also for the larger issue that I think got Mr. Ireland and the group involved. There's many folks that are living here that are in the area of the Foss Road, the 707 Foss Road facility, and they're concerned about that similar issue starting in that area, and this interim control bylaw will assist with that. So for all of those reasons, and I appreciate the latitude of council allowing me to speak, I am supportive as well on the bylaw as amended to adding that agricultural piece. So unless there are other councillors that would like to speak to it, I'm going to call the question on the amended bylaw. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So the interim control bylaw is now approved. It's in force and effect. And so thank you very much to our presenters, both from CanTrust and Mr. Ireland and others. Thank you. That motion is carried. Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I'm just asking if there's hops. I'm not sure if he does.
Maybe.
Council, let's take a couple minute recess. All right.
Back on.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now continue. Thank you for the recess, and thanks to all who were here for the first part and are staying for the second part. We now have a motion moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved that the October 4th, 2018 report submitted by Regional Councillor be received for information. Comments or questions to that? Just an interesting thing, if I might, council colleagues. Something subsequent to this report came out, and this is the Niagara Region Municipality was just reaffirmed in their AA outlook, remaining stable for debt. I thought it was quite interesting because one of the concerns that was brought up at the region was that the town's debt would impact negatively the region's credit rating, and therefore all debt. Well, it's quite clear from this report that that's not the case, that was, in fact, it says that Niagara plans to issue about $223 million in 2018-2020 on behalf of its lower tier municipalities, as well as fund part of the region's capital projects. And they're fine with that. So something that this council's been saying for a long time, to the town's debt is included in this report, and the concerns that some regional councillors expressed about the debt affecting the region are unfounded. It's worth a read. Thank you very much. Going to call the question on the regional councillor's report. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Adoption of minutes. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Council minutes from October 1st, 2018. Are there any errors or omissions? No. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved that I should ask ahead of time, are there any items under consent that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? There's not many there, so, okay. Be it resolved the following consent agenda items be received, the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. Resolutions and recommendations resulting from the Committee of the Whole meeting of October 1st, 2018, and the minutes of that meeting, and also Committee of Adjustment hearing minutes that we received them, and those were Committee of Adjustment for July 10th and August 14th, 2018. Comments or questions on any of those? There were some questions that committee asked about as a result of that, and I hope that the I know that the clerk took note of those, and I hope that the CAO or other members of staff are able to answer some of those concerns. Is that what your line of questioning was, or comment, Councillor Ribbiak?
No, my comment was on 952, so I'll wait for you to.
Yeah, it's on the minutes. Or is there an error or omission?
No.
It was regarding that. Go ahead. Why don't we go to you, Councillor? Go ahead.
Thank you. 952 is the NCDRA Niagara Central Dorothy Rungeling Airport.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was, that wasn't, we didn't add that to the agenda, I don't think. It didn't make it to the agenda, so we'll have to do it next time.
We'll comment on it next time, when it will be.
Thank you. Yeah, we were supposed to add that.
Yeah, didn't. Okay. It's fine.
Mr. McDonald, can you please go outside and just ask those folks to maybe go around the corner so that we can continue to have it? Thank you. So there were some questions about some issues that members of council asked in our committee meeting. I know one of them was regarding Summersides and whether it was a four-way stop was going to be put in and approved by council at Summersides and Station and Pelham Town Square. Mr. CAO, are you able to?
That work will be commencing as part of the intersection upgrades. So at this point, the road was opened in order to facilitate car access. The intersection at Station and Summerside still is under construction, and that intersection will be a roundabout, as you know, and that will be installed hopefully fairly shortly.
Okay, I thought that council approved a four-way stop at that intersection, so if that could be.
I'm not aware that council approved a four-way stop.
Okay. I thought we did, so if you can just
I
maybe
will-
check into that.
I will certainly do
And then
that.
also, there's been questions from the community about a sidewalk on Summersides. I know that I did talk to staff about it, and they said that a concrete sidewalk may not be done this year, but an asphalt sidewalk, a temporary one, on one side. I don't know if you have any other insight into that, Mr. CIO?
There will be a sidewalk as per the design guidelines for East Fawn Hill. The option of putting a temporary asphalt strip in order to facilitate a temporary sidewalk was in the order of $60,000. It's unbudgeted, and administratively, we did not approve that, nor are we recommending that to council. The construction of the sidewalk will commence next year as planned. So it made little sense to spend that amount of money in order to take out a temporary sidewalk to replace it next year with a permanent one.
Okay, thank you. So, but it is planned for next year?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. What were some of the other questions that we asked the committee? There was a whole list. Councillor Kersey?
I had a couple, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, as a follow-up with respect to the dehumidification units on the rinks, and whether we were getting an extension on our warranty period, or whether it was going to be replaced as if it were a lemon. The staff was going to look into that and find out.
I know staff, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that staff is looking at that. I don't have an answer for you tonight.
I did speak to staff there. They understood that it was working properly
Okay.
at the facility, so
Oh, that's
we'll
good.
get an answer perhaps at our next committee meeting.
I just wondered, given that we had issues with it, whether there would be an extended warranty period offered by the manufacturer.
Okay. Mr. CAO, you'll get that
I'll
answer
get
for
back
us.
to council on that.
Okay. Any other items? Councillor King?
I believe there was a question about the, what do you call it, on haste?
The chicane and the,
No, not on haste, sorry, on lookout.
correct,
We wanted an update on that situation.
Traffic control.
traffic control on.
Yeah, that'll be
Okay.
coming as well.
Okay.
So we don't have the answer tonight, but it's coming to our next meeting?
That's correct.
Okay. Were there any other items? Councillor Kersey?
I think it's there. The other item that I raised was to get an update with respect to alternative parking considerations for the MCC. I wanted to get an update on that and look forward to receiving a report. I don't know whether CAO could comment on that or not.
Mr. CAO?
Planning staff is drafting that report. I haven't seen a final copy of it yet, and I defer to the director to let council know when they should expect that.
Thank you. Ms. Weens?
I would hope to bring a report to council probably at the next meeting in November.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Durley, you had a,
Roads were an issue, particularly the surface of Welland Road from Hayes to Pelham, which has been an item of great concern for many folks. And again, we were to look in at that. I noticed also there's some small sinkhole type things happening on Merritt Road between Line and Rice. So there's a couple issues that should be looked at.
can those please come to council? I don't know if you have the answers now, Mr. CAO.
No, those will come to council, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. There was a list there that council asked, and we had hoped, I think, to get some information here. So we have some of it, and we look forward to additional items coming forward. Anything else on there, under items under consent? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Papp has a conflict regarding the next report.
Mr. Mayor, did we pass the consent, adopt all the consent?
We did, yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Was there an item?
No, I didn't realize you called the question with
I did.
respect to all the consent. I guess I fell asleep.
Can't understand why.
Perhaps we can get the councillor some coffee.
Thank you.
It's been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, the council received the Department of Community Planning and Development report as it pertains to file application number SP 1017 located on the northeast corner of Baxter Lane and Welland Road, and the council approved the bylaw attached here Here too as Appendix A, authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter in a site plan agreement with 1875159 Ontario Inc. on behalf of the town. Questions or comments to the report? Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you. Just with regard to Baxter Hall, and I can tell you, Mr. Mayor, that I'm really happy that it's here in front of us. Finally, it's been a long time. It's been several years that we've been looking at this. But I think we can be satisfied that every aspect of this project has been very carefully considered. The report certainly indicates that. Trees, lights, traffic, water and sewage infrastructure, everything. I think this is going to be of a tremendous benefit to the Fenwick downtown. We're talking about 76 units for capable seniors, which means 100 plus new residents in the downtown core. And the impact on commerce and services, our library, for example, the additional support and use that it will get. But beyond that, what's coming with the project is some health professional, technical support downtown, accessible to everyone. But also, that represents employment from the health professionals, the technical support, cleaning staff, maintenance. All of that is work that is going to be done in downtown Fenwick, and I don't think we can downplay the economic impact and the impact of that on downtown Fenwick. So I see it as a real shot in the arm. I'm old enough and lived here long enough to remember Fenwick as something of a bustling hub for the local community. And we lost that, of course, as institutions moved out of town. We lost the high school, for example, quite understandably. Post office, various other services. And with that came a reduction in vibrancy. This, I think, is going to move this in the other direction, and I think that's going to be great. And in the years to come, the additional developments that are considered, everything from the revitalization of the old fire hall into both commercial and residential living, plus, of course, eventually you've got to finish Oak Haven, which is the completion of Sherry Ridge and East Fenwick itself. So in the years to come, I think Fenwick is going to, if nothing else, at least reestablish the balance between the two downtowns. Pelham has always been a town with a number of downtowns, and the two principal ones, Fenwick and Fonthill, I think will come back in balance, as I said, within the community. So I'm really happy that this is happening. I think it's going to mean good things. I'm going to be very happy to support this.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Others? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Numerous planning studies over the years have looked at how one revitalizes a downtown core. And invariably, they come back, you revitalize the downtown core by bringing people to the downtown core and having people live in the downtown core. And if you look at areas in Hamilton as one of the first areas that really embraced that concept, and what they did is by bringing people downtown and creating residences downtown on second, third, fourth floors, they were able to revitalize the commercial aspect of that downtown core. So I echo Councillor Ribbiak's enthusiasm for the project. I think this will be a tremendous boon to the revitalization of downtown Fenwick. You know, a number of years ago, the municipality undertook the revitalization of the public sphere. I believe it turned out extremely well. It is one of the cutest little villages in the surrounding area. And I'm hopeful that with this project and the old fire hall project, there will be an attraction for new businesses in the downtown core, and that will improve the vibrancy and will draw people to Fenwick and to see what a wonderful little place it is. And again, that will add strength to the existing businesses, the restaurants that are there, and the other businesses that are in the downtown core. So I applaud staff as well for the work with the developer. It has taken a long time, not necessarily because of staff, but because of responsiveness and timelines to get information back in. But I am assured that our staff have done a great job in protecting the infrastructure and ensuring that is sufficient, and that the neighborhoods will be respected with this development. So I will be supporting it and applaud all the parties involved. I think it's a great project.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Lane?
Oh, thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor, as my other colleagues have said, being from this area for 50-plus years and remembering downtown Fenwick, how it was, and how you could get about everything you wanted downtown Fenwick, and now you don't have that opportunity. So it'd be nice to see this development. It would be nice to have that revitalization downtown, and it can only be a plus for downtown. This on top of, as you said earlier, the old fire hall and what have you. It's only a plus for downtown, and I very much look forward to it as putting new life into the old girl.
Thank you. Any others? Just want to echo and underscore what some of the councillors have said. This is a great project. It's will be that shot in the arm, as Councillor Ribyak indicated, and I think we've been hoping that this had been coming for a while. Using essentially the former SS number 9 school as the basis for the design. And the design on this is outstanding, keeping with the character of our community, and they really captured that vision of the community. So it's not only that, as you indicated, that shot in the arm for downtown and the character, but also an opportunity for longtime residents to use the terminology age in place, to stay in the part of the community that they've lived in for many years and that they love. I had the experience of going from door to door in that section of town recently, and one of the residents, longtime resident, said that they're moving out. They're a little bit older because there wasn't something for them to move into in town, and they just couldn't keep functioning in their home, and they were looking ahead. So this provides an option for them, for many others, to stay active in the community, stay involved in the community, be part of the community that they love. And so I applaud the proponents that are putting this together. Build it quickly, please. The community does embrace this. And just to underscore again, not only the heritage and the aging in place, but also the investment that the town made in downtown. And I think it probably got, having discussions with the builder on this, it got them excited about downtown Fenwick because of the millions of dollars that we've invested in there, in terms of fire, in terms of the library, in terms of the actual streetscaping and the beautiful nature. So very, very pleased that it's the private sector dollars are following the public sector dollars and the investments that we've made. So kudos to all, and thanks again to staff. So, Councillor Durlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another important thing is it's going to provide a lot of jobs out there for the time of the construction, so that's an important factor as well. Congratulations.
Thanks, Councillor. Are we ready for calling the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, Council, with your leave, can we consider the bylaw immediately, and then Councillor Papp doesn't have to come into the room and then go out again? Thank you. So it has been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration following bylaws, do not read a first, second, third time and pass the same, and the mayor and clerk being hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 4047 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan agreement for the lands located at the northeast corner of Baxter Lane and Welland Road, municipally known as 1105 Baxter Lane, legally described as Part Lot 4, North Side, Welland Street, Plan 703 Pelham, as in RO 717386. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously as well. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We look forward to your project coming to fruition. Thank you. If we can ask Councillor Papp to rejoin council. Thanks for your patience, gentlemen, for the evening as well. Thank you. We could continue. So we do have the unfinished business, Mr. CEO?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we did add an item under unfinished business regarding the Public Works Director. Going to turn it over to the CAO. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to announce that the town has extended a contract offer to Mr. Jason Marr as the new Director of Public Works. Mr. Marr has accepted the contract. Mr. Marr is a graduate of Queen's University and a professional engineer. His professional experience expands 20-plus years across various scopes and responsibilities. He's got a focus on road infrastructure and heavy civil projects. Jason spent 15 years in the construction industry in the private sector. Excuse me. Moving into the public sector, he spent nearly a decade at the Niagara region, serving as a project manager, overseeing several significant bridge replacement and other major projects. Mr. Marr is a Pelham resident and looking for the opportunity to work in and for his hometown. So we're pleased to welcome him to our organization. His first day of work will be October 29th.
Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to the new Public Works Director starting. I know that you've been answering the questions in light of the fact that we don't have a director. So we look forward to Mr. Marr joining us and welcoming him to the team that we have here with us. So thank you for that update. Now we're going to move to motions, and I would ask Councillor Ribbiak to chair the meeting at that point. Councillor Percy seconds this.
So, you have the motion?
It's right there.
It's right here? Mr. Mayor has asked me to chair this because he doesn't want to read this lengthy motion. Thank you. Moved by Mayor Dave, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Whereas the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, the NPCA, is a provincially mandated agency operating in the region of Niagara, Haldimand County, and the city of Hamilton, funded largely by the region of Niagara. And whereas that each of Niagara's 12 cities, towns, and townships are collectors and contributors of public funds to the region of Niagara and therefore a contributor to the NPCA's funding. And whereas the people of all municipalities represented on the NPCA board deserve openness and accountability relating to how their tax dollars are being spent, how effectively our natural environment is being protected, and how representatives to the NPCA board are appointed. And whereas currently 11 of the 12 Niagara members of the NPCA board are municipal politicians who may not have the necessary conservation and environmental expertise suited to effectively serve on this important board. And whereas for the city of Hamilton, it has been the practice of their city council to appoint citizen representatives to the NPCA board, thus highlighting the importance of the ability to provide appropriate knowledge, experience, and expertise to the board, and establishing a precedent to support citizen appointments to the NPCA. And whereas the Auditor General in her September 27, 2018 report to the Ontario Legislative Assembly recommended that members of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board of Directors should collectively have the skills, experience, and training necessary to oversee the NPCA's activities effectively, and that the NPCA's funding municipalities should ensure that their board appointment processes consider skills and experience requirements, And whereas the informal past practice of the Niagara Regional Council has been to offer a single appointment from each of the 12 local municipalities by first offering appointment to the regional councillors or mayor of the local municipality, and second by a process that defaults to the local municipal councillors, and then finally to citizen representation, please see the attached description from NPCA website. I suppose it will be attached. And whereas the majority of councils across the Niagara Peninsula recently supported a formal appointment protocol that allows the local municipalities to seek applications for appointment to the NPCA board, and that a recommendation for appointment then be subsequently provided to the region by the local municipalities, now therefore be it resolved that the Council for the Town of Pelham hereby requests the Regional Municipality of Niagara to establish a formal process for appointments to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board that would request and permit each of Niagara's local municipalities to publicly advertise and make recommendations for appointment of a qualified and independent citizen with appropriate skills and expertise to represent the respective municipalities, to take effect following the 2018 municipal election or immediately should a vacancy on the MPCA Board of Directors occur, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Niagara Regional Council and Niagara's local area municipalities for endorsement and support, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Auditor General of Ontario, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, the current NPCA Board of Directors, Niagara MPPs, the City of Hamilton, and Haldimand County for information. So I will call upon the mover, Mayor Dave.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. This motion that's before us is something that this council, is very similar to what this council endorsed back in February of 2017, when there were suspicions about the NPCA going through some turmoil, and the idea that we wanted to ensure that there was appropriate oversight of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. Since that time, the Auditor General did a very, very in-depth study of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority at the recommendation of this council, the majority of councils across Niagara, MPPs, et cetera, and a committee of the legislature. Very comprehensive report from the Auditor General, more than 100 pages of recommendations regarding the special audit of the Conservation Authority. Some of those recommendations are very specific to this particular Conservation Authority. There are also recommendations more broad to conservation authorities across the province. Many of the issues and the impacts that the report talks about, and I'd encourage all to read the report, really go back to the board and the governance. The Auditor General found that board members are getting involved in day-to-day decisions and recommendations on direction from the Conservation Authority. She found that the board members were directing certain things, and things like biodiversity offsetting, using a series of consultants to lobby the government to allow the paving over of wetlands in specific instances in Niagara Falls. And she calls in one of her recommendations for board members to have very specific skills, and that the board should work on and should have the skills and experience required based on their mandate to develop and implement the strategy to address this report. The current method of, and it was, I think, appended to this, we'll make sure that all of council gets it, but the current method that members of the board have, it's an informal method that occurs at the region. It's through the region's appointment process. And what happens is the regional councilors for a municipality, the region appoints 12 to the board. And the regional councilors for the town of Pelham, the mayor and the councilor directly elected, or for the city of St. Catharines, the mayor and the 6 councilors have the option of right of first refusal, in essence, to serve on this board. If there's an issue where members looking to serve on this, then there's a vote off and one of them is selected, and then they go to the board. Or if there's just a case of one member, like I think occurred last time or 2 times ago in City of St. Catharines, just one member said, I want to do this, and it's just accepted. So it's regional councilors first. Then the informal idea is that it goes to local councils, and the local councilors can say, yeah, I want to serve on that, and a local council can say, I want to serve, and she wants to serve, and you can have a vote and decide who gets to serve on the NPCA. If no one, after right of first refusal and right of second refusal, says they want to serve, or there's those votes, etc., then it goes to citizens. I think the whole system is backwards. It should be citizens first. It should be the people from our community with the skills and expertise, not only in the environment, whether they have a degree in biology, but also accountants and lawyers and business people and homeowners and people in the broad spectrum of things with a willingness, a desire, an interest, and the expertise to serve on the Conservation Authority. That's what the Auditor General is recommending in her recommendations, that they should have the specific skills required to serve on the Conservation Authority. This next Conservation Authority Board is extremely important because they have this document to oversee and to enact and to fix the things that have been going on at that Conservation Authority for the last couple of terms. It's extremely important that we get the people that are most qualified to do that job, a citizen, a qualified citizen to do that job, and not someone because they were a right of first refusal elected. That's what speaks to this motion. The town of Pelham already approved a motion like this, as I mentioned, in February of 2017, and we need to send this strong message that Pelham Council considers citizens first should be the operative move for this board, so that we can finally clean up the Conservation Authority. The final comment, Mr. Chair, is this motion is very similar to one that was that I put forward with a council colleague at Regional Council, and for some reason we ran out of time and didn't get to it. But I hope we can also approve this at our next Regional Council meeting, or at least consider it. And local and Pelham Council's involvement and comment on this motion, I think, would be very helpful in Regional Council's consideration. And I hope other councils will reapprove the motion that was sent around. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The seconder? Councilor Percy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments will be relatively brief. The mayor hit on most of the salient points. I was particularly motivated to support this motion principally because of the fact I can't think of another body that has a more important charge than the NPCA, and that is to protect our watershed. We all know the impacts of not looking after our watershed and how important that watershed is to us even being able to live in this region and for agricultural processes to proceed, et cetera, et cetera. And I think they've digressed from that very, very important responsibility. And perhaps the reason for the digression is because there was that lack of expertise at the table. I think of how we go about placing people in important roles, our advisory committees, appointment to our library board, et cetera, et cetera. We reach out into the community. We have a set of parameters that we're looking for. We know the needs of the various committees, and we seek. Last time we made an appointment to the library board, we talked to the librarians and to the CEO of the library to find out the types of skills that were needed on the library board. That whole process is sidestepped by the current appointment process. We need to get back to basics. We need to seek the expertise that has been identified by the Auditor General, and we need to involve the members of our community. We all know the wonderful amount of expertise that exists in our community. Think of the advisory committees that we have, the oversight committee, the library board, how amazing the folks that volunteer their time and expertise to sit on those committees. I am certain that we will find that same expertise within our community. If, for some reason, the region feels that they need to have some liaison with the MPCA board as a point of communication, they can do the same sort of thing that we do to our advisory committees. We appoint a council member to sit there as a liaison, a non-voting member, and they are able to bring information back and forth between the region and the MPCA. So that's something that they could look at. But I certainly support this motion. The intent is to be consistent, again, with our February 17 motion. It's not directed at any one particular officer that has been appointed by the MPCA, as has been alleged. This is a large concept paper. It's not directed at an individual. I want to make that 100% clear. So I will be obviously supporting the motion as a seconder and due to my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kersey. Others? Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder how the mayor really feels about this. Since it's only a request, I think we're all perfectly clear. All the whereases point everything out. The long dissertation that the mayor gave also highlights all of the facts there. So if it's a request to go to the region, we have no control over whether it's going to take effect or not. I think we should call the question and go ahead, because any debate that we have here really could be null and void, in fact, if the region sees deaf ears with that. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durley. Councillor Papp, I think you indicated.
I agree with Councilor Durley and with my colleagues. We did debate this way back 16 months ago, so ditto. Let's just get it on and find out what they want to do with it.
Calling the question then. All in favor? And that passes. Do you have Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rivak. I believe we have one item of business left, two items of business left, and that is the confirming bylaw. It has been moved by Councillor Lane, second by Councillor Kersey. Be it resolved, the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Bylaw 4048, to adopt, ratify, confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 15th day of October 2018. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And the last item is adjournment. It has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane. Be it resolved, this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regularly scheduled meeting for November 5th, 2018. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Hey, Bill.